Welcome to Booktopia TV. I'm John Purcell, and I'm here with Val McDermid, author of The Skeleton Road, and 30 or so other best-selling books, non-fiction, short stories, and even a children's book. Welcome back.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Now, you're most well known for writing the series of Tony Hill novels, and also they just got turned into Wire and the Blood on the TV with Robson Green. But you've written 30 plus books over a career. Was it in 1987 or 84?
Mm-hmm. 87.
87.
Was published. I was a mere child back then, of course.
The Skeleton Road. I'm reading it now, and the accomplishment of it. I love reading writers who grow and take on this skill. You can just see the skill of me being played as a reader and following these trails down different directions, and then you can feel the power of a writer bringing me around to the meat of a novel. All those novels, all that writing, is that development necessary to be the kind of writer you are today? Is that long journey?
I think so. I mean, some people seem to get there faster than others, but I think writing is a process. I don't think any of us land fully fledged on our feet with our first novel, and if you're doing this right, then you're doing it as a process of teaching yourself. I'm conscious as a reader that every time I read a book, potentially I can learn something from it in terms of my writing. Good writers teach you one set of skills, bad writers teach you things never to do. You read things and go, never going to do that. So it is a process of improving your skill set. I couldn't have written The Skeleton Road 5 years ago, 10 years ago, certainly not when I started out in 87. It's an accumulation of knowledge, it's an accumulation of storytelling skills. When I started out, my first 3 books I wrote because I wanted to write the third book, and I couldn't figure out how to get there without writing the first 2. Now I've got the narrative sophistication to roll all that up into one big package, but back then I had no idea how to do anything that complicated.
Well, this is a very easy to read book, but it's got 3 or 4 novels running together side by side that seem to interlink and join. Like the way in which you set up effortlessly, which I'm a bit of a writer myself, and I find it very difficult to get into a tone of someone else's voice and start off a new chapter with a new voice and make it so different to the last. You've got 4 different voices that come straight in, bang, 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 one after the other, and there's no confusion. You just into a new story and you just seamlessly go in, and then you can see them coming together. It's just fascinating.
Well, thank you. That's very nice of you to say so. I think before I start a novel, I spend, I suppose, most of the time talking to the people whose novel it is, whose story it is. Who are these people? How did they get to be the way they are? What's their history? What's their background? How do they sound? What does their voices sound like? How do they speak in my head? And so by the time I start to write, I have a fairly clear idea in my head what these people sound like, where they're coming from, what the background is that has shaped them, so the kind of language that they use, the kind of concepts they are familiar with and uncomfortable with. So I suppose by the time I start writing, that vision is very clear. And I don't know, they stay distinct in my head, I suppose, in the way that our friends stay distinct in our heads. You always know, who drinks a gin and tonic, who drives a BMW, who's going to like that particular sweater and who's going to hate it. So in that same way, I feel a sense of who these people are. The difference is that friends stick around for forever, if you're lucky, but the characters go away at the end of the book and don't reappear until you're perhaps going to use them again in another book.
With this particular book, it seems like live writing. I'm reading it and you're mentioning Putin and Ukraine. I'm reading it and you're mentioning the Commonwealth Games. I'm reading it and you're mentioning the Scottish independence vote. How do you manage that when you're writing over a certain period of time? Is it right at the last minute before it goes to print? You just add in the last. You fix up the last little bit of modern commentary. That's pretty confident.
I think I write in real time, as it were, and I write the books. The books get physically written in quite an intense period of time, between 2 to 3 months. And that's it's there. It's right in front of my face when I'm writing it. And the books have that thing of being set in real time, so there's enough detail to anchor it for someone reading it in years to come and go, oh yeah, that was then.
Yeah.
Which also, in a funny kind of way, stops the book from dating, because if you've got changes in technology or whatever, and the reader's going, well, why don't they just use such and such? And then they think, oh no, this is 2014.
Yeah.
So it's just enough to anchor it, but not so much that it's nailed down on all four corners to that year. It could only happen then. So there's this. I want my books to feel contemporary, and of course, one of the advantages that crime writers have over literary writers is that we tend to write a book a year. That's what's expected of us. Often literary writers take 5, sometimes 10 years to write a book, so they can't have that level of engagement with the contemporary world that we can manage to have, because we're writing year on year. So this is this year's book, very firmly set this year.
It does make it rather exciting to have it happening almost, it just happens to be happening in Scotland and in England and in the Falklands War, going back to that. It has an immediacy which is quite thrilling.
I hope so. I was very lucky that this book actually came out the week before the referendum, so I didn't have to know the result of the referendum, so I could refer to it without actually coming down on either side of the fence as to which way it was going to go. But yeah, there is, I think, from the crime novel has become increasingly, I think, the novel of social commentary. In 100 years' time, when people want to know how we live now, it's the crime novel they'll turn to, because a lot of writers are very, very clearly writing in the here and now, writing about the society they inhabit, and shining a light on that society. Because the other advantage of the crime novel in those terms is that it's not hermetic, it's not a little sealed group, as literary fiction often is. By its nature, the crime novel has the potential to embrace the whole of society. You've got the victim, you've got their friends and family, you've got their workmates, whatever it is they do for a career. You've got the cops, you've got the media, you've got the forensic scientists. All of these people have often got different social backgrounds, they move in different worlds. So you can draw on all sorts of different aspects of the society that you're writing about to give it a fully fleshed picture.
You seem to be very comfortable with it, but for a lot of writers, hearing you talk about writing in this sort of live moment, it's a very frightening and daunting task to do it. You've been doing it for years, I suppose, just as part of your writing life, but it's a challenge.
I suppose it's how I am. I mean, I'm engaged with the world I live in. I'm a political animal. I have opinions. I have a place in the world, if you like. I care about what's happening in the world around me. So I want to be able to engage with that, and to be able to do that through the field of fiction is an interesting proposition, because it allows you to be, in a sense, much more opinionated and much less fact-based. Nobody's going to say to you, but that statistic is proved wrong by such and such a thing. You see, I can just make it up as I go along. I find sometimes I do sort of current affairs programs on TV or radio, and I have to advance, I have to get my figures right, I have to prepare, whereas in a novel I can just make it up as I go along. This is a great joy of it all. I've just written a non-fiction book about forensic science, and I found that tremendously hard work, because you have to get your facts right. Because there's lots of people out there to correct you if you get them wrong. But whereas in a novel you can say, well, it's a fictional universe. It's in my universe. This is how it is.
Oh, well, I'm relying on you though, because in fiction, it's. I mean, people use stories all throughout history to make a point. And I get swayed, and I remember having arguments with my father, who would always be saying, but Frederick Forsyth said this, and I go, it's Frederick Forsyth! it's not an encyclopedia.
Yeah, you see, ultimately we come back to what Jane Austen said, is you shouldn't take novels as a guide for life.
Yeah.
They can inform you, but they're not a Bible for your life.
Well, I'm Jane Austen, and I want to talk to you a little bit about Northanger Abbey.
Yeah.
How did that come about, and as a reader of Jane Austen, how did you dare to do it?
Well, I came about because I was asked. The HarperCollins are doing this thing called the Austen Project, which involves getting contemporary writers to rework the Austen novels in a modern setting. Same plot, same characters, but our world. My former editor at HarperCollins came up to me and said, we're doing this project, we'd like you to do Northanger Abbey. And I sort of looked over my shoulder thinking, who's she talking to? Because it surely can't be me. And I hesitated probably for about 30 seconds, because I thought, this is a huge ask to take on Jane Austen. That's crazy. And then I thought, yeah, but I've never done anything like this before. Okay. I'll do it.
Northanger Abbey is one of those deceptively simple books. It's not. People often put it down the list of Jane Austen's works, but it's got this this comic line through it that is, and this satire through it, which is masterly, even for a young. I mean, it's one of her earlier books.
Yeah.
I've read your Northanger Abbey, and it was a great, light, fun read, and I love this idea. And Alexander McCall Smith's now doing
He's
Emma.
doing Emma.
Yeah.
I can't wait to read that.
Yeah, that looks like a lot of fun as well.
Yeah.
And I'm just hopeful. I mean, I believe that it's encouraging people to jump back into Austen. Not that she needs any help. She's one of the biggest selling writers of all time.
Yeah, but I think people are still daunted a bit. I mean, people who are not particularly educated readers, if you like, people who have maybe not gone to university and people who maybe didn't read Austen at school are a bit daunted by the classics. They think these books are not for me. They're mistaken in that belief, but they often feel that way. So you need something that will perhaps lead them to those books to understand how fantastic they are. That's not just something that adapts well for film and TV. I think I knew when I took it on that Northanger is sort of the least read and the least popular, and of course the reason for that is the satire. It's the pastiche, the parody of Gothic novels, and if you don't have an understanding, a knowledge of the object of the satire, you miss the point, and you just go, this isn't very funny, or this just doesn't work. And so for me, the challenge was finding something contemporary that did work, that you could take the mickey out of. And I mean, there was the sort of Twilight novels, vampires, zombies, and just ripe for satire. I mean, I have a teenage son who is absolutely convinced that the zombie apocalypse is just round the corner. We have conversations around the breakfast table about, would an axe or a spade be a better weapon against a zombie? So I thought this was I'm lucky to be in this sort of cycle of popular tastes in fiction that gave me such a good object of satire as this. So that was a gift really, and then it let me just play with the subject the way that Austen herself does, and play with her ideas about fiction and just have a laugh really.
Looking at Scotland, I'm thinking also of the boom in Scandinavia with the crime. You mentioned, as you went through describing what Scottish crime was, Scandinavian crime had to stop at a point because there's no humour.
Yeah, that's right.
All the darkness.
There's not many jokes in Henning Mankell.
No. That's where the similarities really stop.
But I suppose also the thing with Scottish crime fiction is it's also been part of a wider Scottish literary renaissance in the whole of the last 25, 30 years as well. Scots have been finding their voice in lots of different ways. So writers like Irvine Welsh, Ali Smith, Jackie Kay, all giving different voice to Scottish identity. And it's been a very exciting time to be writing as a Scot.
And you think all this this sense of self, this confidence has led to this independence vote?
Well, I think it's all been part of the same sort of snowball that's rolled us towards this point. Where we've had the referendum vote, which didn't quite work out the way some of us would have liked, but equally this isn't the end of the story.
No. When you're looking at those last few days before the vote, with the announcement of William and Kate's baby and the Queen getting involved, do you reckon that was a kind of a fear tactic, or what sort of things? It
was completely fear. I mean, the Better Together campaign was dubbed Project Fear by the other side, and rightly so. I think it's interesting that all the Westminster politicians would show no interest whatsoever in what was happening north of the border until the point where they thought, oh my God, the yes vote might swing it. And then suddenly they all rushed up to Scotland and made all sorts of promises. It's like when you're splitting up with somebody and they don't want you to leave, and they go like, you can have the Tiffany earrings, and I'll never forget our anniversary again. Next year when it's your birthday, I won't go to the rugby club dinner. But you know perfectly well that when next year rolls round, of course they'll go to the bloody rugby club dinner, because they always do. And so we've got all these promises on the table now, and I don't believe they'll keep the promises. And I believe that when they don't keep the promises, the Scottish people will be very angry.
And how long will it take to get another referendum going?
Well, there's a general election next year, and if the Scottish people are very angry by next year, as they may well be, because by that time it will be clear whether the timetable of these pledges is being kept or not, then we have one opportunity to give them a good kicking. And then there's a Scottish parliamentary election the following year in 2016, and if it were to be the case that the Scottish pro-independence parties was to run on a ticket of we'll give you another referendum, I don't think that would necessarily be unpopular, shall we say.
It's been lovely talking to you, Val.
It's been lovely talking to you too.
Val McDermid's new book, The Skeleton Road, is available at booktopia.com.au, along with all of her other books.